Hello everybody, this is NerdGasm, and today I wanted to count down the 10 best villains from the Batman Arkham franchise, one of my favorite video game series of all time. Before we begin, obviously not all of the villains featured in the Arkham series are going to be on this list. If they aren't, then that means I simply don't feel they had much significance in the story, didn't pop up a whole lot, and didn't make much of an impact on me. Or, in Catwoman's case, I wouldn't really consider her a villain. She's an ally of Batman in each of the games she is in, so she really doesn't count. Despite being the secondary antagonist of the most recent game, Arkham Knight isn't going to be on this list either. While I think he's an amazing character in terms of concept, the way he was executed was not ideal. I would like to remind you that I have reviewed each of the Arkham games on my channel, so some of these characters I have discussed before in greater detail, if you want to check those videos out. With that in mind, my descriptions for some of the villains in this video will be brief, because again, I have discussed them before. Let's not kick a dead horse here. Starting the list off at number 10, Ra's al Ghul. He was the secret main antagonist of Arkham City, pulling the strings behind the scenes, which led to a pretty effective reveal. He also has an amazing boss battle, one I would rank pretty high in the series. In Arkham Knight, he returns in a side mission which brings Batman's moral compass and vow of not killing into question, which I thought was really interesting. Apart from that, not much more to say about him. I probably went in greater detail in my Arkham City or Arkham Knight reviews, at least I think I did, so maybe watch them. Ra's al Ghul was done justice in the Arkham franchise, at least in my opinion, but I do admit a little bit more could have been done with him, so that's why he's number 10. Next up at number 9 is the Mad Hatter. He appears in 3 out of the 4 games, and each of his encounters manage to be some of the most unique, enjoyable, and visually interesting sequences of their respective games. In Arkham Origins, Mad Hatter kidnaps a woman he believes is Alice, and Batman goes to his hideout, the Hat Shop, to rescue her. It's here where Mad Hatter hypnotizes Batman, and the Caped Crusader becomes trapped in Wonderland. After traversing this strange place and solving some puzzles, you stop Jervis Tetch and save Alice. In Arkham City, Mad Hatter returns and through a remote hypnotic suggestion makes Batman believe Alfred has contacted him, telling him that Lucius Fox has created a cure to the Titan disease infecting him. When Batman takes this cure, he passes out and finds himself strapped to a chair at a tea party hosted by the Hatter and surrounded by hypnotized Arkham City inmates. Batman overcomes Mad Hatter's mind control and battles him and his henchmen on a disorienting clock, falling through space-time, dimensions, down the rabbit hole essentially. And finally, in Arkham Knight, Mad Hatter kidnaps various police officers that Batman must rescue, culminating in a combat sequence within the pages of a giant pop-up book. The goal of the Hatter in this game was to mold Batman into becoming his new Alice. Number 8 is Poison Ivy. Her appearance in Arkham City was quite forgettable, but she plays a larger role in the original Arkham Asylum, taking over the entirety of Arkham Island with her Titan-infused plants. Her boss encounter is the penultimate one of the game, and easily the strongest in my opinion. Not a lot of the boss battles were very good in that first game, so it's not saying much. The biggest reason Ivy makes this list, though, is because of her character arc over the span of her appearances. By the time Arkham Knight rolled around, she had become more of an anti-heroine, sacrificing herself to eliminate Scarecrow's fear toxin within Gotham, one of the most powerful moments in the entire Arkham saga. It's beautiful. For number 7, I'm going with the Penguin. He pops up in enough of the games and manages to be a pimple on Batman's ass in each of his appearances. His role in Arkham Origins is the smallest, but he does appear in the Mr. Freeze DLC, which was cool. In Arkham City, the sequence in his museum is one of the strongest parts of the game in my opinion. There are some great cinematics, strong voice acting from Nolan North, and an awesome battle with Solomon Grundy to top it all off. Moving on to number 6, we have Harley Quinn, the main squeeze of the Joker, who appears alongside him in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, helping him accomplish his plans. In Arkham Asylum, she has a fairly big role, but is taken out of the picture when Joker drops her like dead weight for failing him, allowing Batman to lock her up in a cell. In Arkham City, she's absent from the majority of the game, but does fail to bring Joker the cure to his Titan disease when she is intercepted by Talia on her way back to Joker's steel mill. This is one of the biggest factors fueling her guilt during the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC, because deep down, she partially blames herself for what happened, or at least is in denial about it. And in Arkham Knight, Harley Quinn's appearance is more or less the same, still pissed off about Joker's death, putting all the blame on Batman. The sequence with her in the Panessa movie studios, when you get to team up with Robin, is really cool, even though all of that multiple Joker stuff is one of the game's weakest elements in my opinion, narratively speaking. At number 5, we have the Riddler, one of the very few villains to appear in every Arkham title to date. In Arkham Asylum, he was just speaking to you after hacking Batman's communications device, but you get the idea. Solving riddles and collecting Riddler trophies has been a staple of the series since day one. Arkham Origins veered off the path a bit, but it took place earlier in Batman's crime-fighting career, when Edward Nygma, or Edward Nashton, was still finding his identity, so it made sense. Regardless, the Riddler has played a prominent role in each of the games, and seeing as there are so many riddles to solve, he's typically the final villain you take down in each. I think the Riddler is one of the strongest characters in the entire franchise. He's voiced by Wally Wingert, who does a bang-up job. His design is great, and he's written pretty well, at least in Arkham Asylum and City that is. By the time Arkham Knight was released, I was a bit annoyed and exhausted at the whole Riddler Collectathon thing. If another game does come out, I hope there is less emphasis on these puzzles. They're far too tiresome at this point, and like I said, the writing in Asylum and City is much better in regards to the Riddler, because in Knight, his motivations are not as well defined. Also, the whole Batmobile racetrack thing makes no sense. Watch my review of the game for more on that. Apart from Michael Ansara's legendary portrayal of Mr. Freeze in Batman the Animated Series, which is the best, Maurice LaMarche's from the Arkham games is a close second, at least in my opinion. Any great Freeze needs to sound calming, soothing, yet intimidating, encompassing the cold-hearted nature of the character. Mr. Freeze made his first appearance in Arkham City, and seeing him visualized was something I had imagined ever since the days of Arkham Asylum, though the existence of the boss battle with him in Arkham City is contrived and unnecessary plot-wise. The fight itself is easily the greatest in the entire franchise. He's the only villain that adapts as you fight him, forcing you to vary your strategy. In the Arkham Origins DLC, Cold Cold Heart, which was based off the Emmy Award-winning episode Heart of Ice from Batman the Animated Series, we got a more classic design for the character, seeing as it takes place shortly after his transformation. The story was adapted relatively well, all things considered, and we even got to witness his origin unfold. Well, sort of. I don't think any other villain got much of an origin in these games, at least one that was visualized as strongly as Mr. Freeze's. I'm not a huge fan of his redesign in Arkham Knight, but the side mission featuring Mr. Freeze was a very satisfying conclusion for his story, and one we really hadn't seen before in other forms of media. It was powerful, emotional, it was well done. Next up at number 3 is Bane. Though his appearances in Arkham Asylum and Arkham City are pretty watered down, he's nothing more than a mindless brute, his role in 2013's Arkham Origins was much stronger, making him one of the best villains this series has ever seen. The boss battle with Bane on the rooftop of the Gotham Royal Hotel is one of the best in the franchise, and story-wise he was a major threat, popping up several times throughout the game's narrative, and even learns of Batman's true identity, showing just how intelligent this version of Bane is compared to the other games. Bane would end up breaking into the Batcave and beat Alfred within an inch of his life. The good butler dies in Batman's arms, and the Dark Knight is forced to resuscitate him using the electrical power of the shock gloves. At number 2, we have the Joker, which is probably a shocker to many of you. Most people would list Joker as being the best villain in the Arkham franchise, but I don't. I think that's too cliché. Yes, he's voiced by Mark Hamill, at least in Arkham Asylum, City, and Knight. Yes, he plays a significant role in each game. And yes, there are emotional and impactful moments that happen with him, but he isn't the best villain. I think his track record in this series is too inconsistent for that to be the case. In Arkham Asylum, Joker takes over the prison, and it's easily the strongest narrative featuring him in this series, and it's what you'd expect from a classic Batman vs. Joker story. Apart from the lackluster final boss, the game's direction in regards to the Joker is about as spotless as you can get. Arkham City features Joker poison Batman with his blood, and failed to get a cure, dying in Batman's arms at the end. The final moments of Arkham City are memorable and iconic, but Joker does take a back seat for the majority of the story, in favor of Hugo Strange, the Penguin, even Ra's al Ghul. Arkham Origins left a bittersweet taste in my mouth. On one hand, it tells a pretty solid origin story to the Batman vs. Joker feud, while on the other, it comes at the cost of undermining one of Batman's more underrated rogues in Black Mask. A lot of people say Joker hijacks Batman stories a lot, but to be honest, I find it's usually an exaggeration. Here, it's the honest truth though. Joker somehow strengthens and weakens the story of Batman Arkham Origins at the same time. It didn't need him. I was hoping it wasn't going to use him, and instead focus on some lesser-known Batman characters, even ones that have been rarely used in the video game medium, give them a fighting chance, but sadly, that wasn't the case. I came really close to having Joker be number 1 on this list, and it makes sense, seeing as he is Batman's greatest villain. However, this isn't a top 10 Batman villains list. This is a top 10 Arkham villains list. We have to focus on the games. Ignore the comics, ignore the movies, ignore the TV shows. This is focusing on the games themselves. So who do I think deserves the top spot when it comes to the games? At number 1, I have chosen the Scarecrow. Why? Because in both of the games he's featured in, Arkham Asylum and Arkham Knight, you could argue he kind of steals the show. His parts are the most memorable, at least in my opinion. In Arkham Asylum, he faces off against you in 3 different nightmare sequences. One has Batman confront the deceased corpses of his parents in the morgue, with them blaming him for what happened that fateful night. Another has Bruce experience the death of his parents all over again as a child, remembering the kind words of Jim Gordon to snap him out of it. The final sequence makes the player believe their game has crashed, and then shows you the opening cinematic all over again, this time with the roles reversed. Joker is driving the Batmobile, and Batman is the one in the passenger seat, captured by the Joker, and when they reach the asylum, the other inmates have become the staff, and the police, the prisoners. Joker shoots Batman and seemingly kills him, only for him to crawl out of his own grave. In each of these sequences, you, as the player, must traverse a nightmarish obstacle course with a giant Scarecrow watching over it. Your goal is to reach the Bat Signal, a physical embodiment of Batman's will and fortitude. Scarecrow's ultimate goal in Arkham Asylum is to contaminate Gotham's water supply with his fear toxin, but he is seemingly killed at the hands of Killer Croc, who drags him under the water in the sewers. Scarecrow wouldn't die, however, as he would survive and rebuild himself, returning in Arkham Knight with the sole intention of destroying Batman and Gotham City, and this depiction of Scarecrow is the main reason he is on my list as number 1, because out of all of the villains in the franchise, this character is written the best, in my opinion, the most competent, the biggest threat Batman goes up against. Scarecrow is the only villain who really succeeds in what he sets out to do, destroy Batman by cornering him, giving him no other way out. He also activates a fear toxin bomb in the city, which Batman may have reduced to the blast radius of, but it still does a lot of damage, like nothing we had seen before in the series leading up to that point. And, of course, the final reason Scarecrow is number 1 is because his appearance in Arkham Knight is simply incredible. His design is terrifying and makes sense within the narrative. He's being held together by bits of string essentially, and his voice, provided by John Noble, is fucking amazing. This Scarecrow is the whole package, a film-quality villain found within a video game. And that about does it for this list. If there are any villains from the Arkham franchise you feel should have been included, be sure to leave them in the comments section down below. Again, if they weren't on here, then it's because I found them to be disappointing in some way, uneventful or insignificant in the grand scheme of things, any combination of those things. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell icon to be notified of all future content I release. If you'd like to check out my in-depth reviews of each of the Arkham titles, you can do that as well on the channel. I discuss a lot more of this stuff in greater detail. Support me on Patreon if you can. Any bit helps and keeps the YouTube dream alive. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.